Hello, this is Anna Imagination with day 5, second video, and this is the power of self. We are going to be covering emotions today, the love language of the subconscious mind. Emotions. Emotions are products that come out of the cognitive mind, specifically the cognitive core, during processing. It is specifically when we receive data that goes into the cognitive core. And depending upon what is going on with the cognitive core and its relationship to the new belief and how that new belief and data is being inserted into the cognitive core, how it is changing or affecting your point of view or your story. All of those things, all of those relationships, the new belief, the new data coming in and how it's changing that point of view is all producing emotions from the subconscious mind to the conscious awareness, the conscious mind telling you, hey, this is what's happening with this data. This is how this data is affecting your story. So in this video, we're going to break down what that looks like, and we're going to take a closer look into it. But before we can do that, you must understand what's going on with the stages of grief. The stages of grief were actually incorrectly named. The stages of grief are actually a series of steps that take place when the cognitive core produces all the emotions in the stages necessary to shift your perspective. However, in the case of the stages of grief, it gets stuck on depression. So the stages of change is what they should be called, because not everything gets stuck on the stages of depression, which is where the misnomer and it's misleading. The stages of grief is one option of how the stages of changes can go. The stages of grief shows you what life would look like or what the emotion looks like if you reject a belief in the depression stage. But that doesn't happen in every case. There's what happens if you get a promotion. That's not going to lead to the stages of grief. What happens if you find out that you're going to be a parent and this is wanted news? What if it's not wanted news? What if you are received information and it's startlingly exciting and you can't figure out if it's good or bad? All of this information produces emotions to communicate the status of the cognitive core. So we're going to start by imagining that the cognitive core is a rectangular box, and this box is made up of different departments. Okay, the departments are your identity. This is defined by what you love. If you know what you love, we're going to assume that this is a cognitive core that belongs to an individual who is healthy and who knows themselves, and there's been almost no abuse. They are at optimal mental health. So this example is going to assume and reflect what should be taking place in optimal mental health. So you have your it. This is stage 1. This is your identity. This is what you are, which is all defined by what you love. That then goes into your second compartment, which is your ethics. This is what you feel is right morally and what is wrong morally. It is very common for people to confuse moral ethics, right and wrong, with correct and incorrect. So I'm going to stop for a minute and talk about that. Incorrect and correct assumes that we live in a world of fact. This is a societal lie. This is a societal gaslight, and it's bullshit. There is no fact. So says the philosopher. So we're going to set aside this and call it a societal gaslight. There is no fact. There is no correct or incorrect. We are looking at the morals of what is right and what is wrong. So when I say the word right, I do not mean correct. I mean, is this ethical or is this unethical? Whether or not something is ethical or unethical is determined by an individual based on what they love. It does not come from your God. It does not come from your parents. It does not come from a religion. It does not come from an ancient text. It comes from the identity and what they love. I will remind you that this is assuming the person is in optimum mental health. Okay? So you have box stage number 1, which is your identity, who you are, and what you have defined as yourself, which is based off of what you love. Ethics, what is right, what is wrong, what is ethical, what is unethical. The third box is where all the activity happens. That is your beliefs. That box has a funnel above it, a massive catch-all. That is where we put in data from the outside world. Data comes in many forms. This data can be opinions of others. It can be information from school. It can be from religions. It can be from statements, media, governments, propaganda. It is data. The data is only based off of 5 senses, not 6 sense. This is not the time to start throwing in the 6th sense. That's something different. Reminder, this is the cognitive core. This is the subconscious mind. Intuition does not exist in the subconscious mind. There are 5, only 5 senses. What you see, what you observe gets turned into a belief. What you physically feel, what you get touched, not emotionally feel, there's a difference. What you physically feel, that is data. What you taste, what you put in your mouth, that is data. What you smell and what you hear, music, sounds, advice, opinions, lies, gaslighting, that is all auditorial data. That all goes into your system, gets filtered down into this funnel, and gets dumped into beliefs. Now, we're going to pause on beliefs and go to the next one. The next one is your defense system. Your defense system is the thing that kicks up and starts ripping everything apart to keep you safe, to defend this process from happening, or it is shut down and there is no filter in defense so that any data that goes in goes unfiltered. You can call this the filter. Yeah, that's a great thing to call this. So the 4th stage is the filter. The last stage is your story or your point of view, your perspective. This is the gold mine. This is the treasure at the end of this journey. This is the precious, dangerously fragile, beautiful jewel at the end of this processing. Your mental health is completely dependent upon your perspective, your point of view. If your point of view gets altered, adjusted, or changed in a negative, it's going to hurt you. If it gets changed for the positive, your mental health will flourish. Your perspective, your point of view, your story is what gets to determine your mental health. This person who we have just laid out is of optimal mental health processing. They are living optimum mental health. So here's how this system works. I'm going to use myself here. I know what I love. I know what I am. I know what defines me. I know what my ethics are. I know what is ethical and what is unethical. I have my beliefs. My beliefs are solid. I have a couple limiting beliefs in there. I'm looking for them. I'm going to remove them. But for the most part, I would say 99% of my beliefs are solid, healthy, and mine. The id, the ethics, and the beliefs are all accumulated, and they are logically compared in a kind of a proof form. And then it goes through the defense system, and the defense system turns on and it evaluates the overall health and says, this is safe for the point of view in the story. Yes, you can add this to the story to enhance your optimum mental health. It goes into the story, the perspective is solidified, and I have my views and my point of view. Now, the data that comes in goes through a process. I get opinions from somebody. And as an opinion comes in, it goes right into my belief. And immediately it contradicts my identity and my ethics. My identity and my ethics are solidly based on my frequency and my intuition, which tells me where I need to be vibrationally living. This is authentic living. Every time a belief comes in from somebody else's mouth that contradicts my frequency, intuition, authentic living, identity, ethics, and beliefs, it jams up the system. When it jams up the system, an emotion is produced. The emotion is discomfort. It doesn't feel good. Because I am in optimum mental health, I have the ability and the conscious awareness to go, ooh, that doesn't feel good, or that doesn't feel right. This is where the defense system steps in and says, whoa, we have something toxic happening here. Step back. I need to check this out. That's when the defense system goes in. The logic kicks in, the ethics, the identity, and the beliefs. And we all set to work to analyze and compare this new opinion from third person into the system and comparing it to the intuition, the frequency, the identity, the ethics, and the beliefs. When all of that information comes in, we evaluate it. All of us, all of my parts, they evaluate it. They locate the illogic, the inconsistency, the cognitive dissonance, and they say, this is inconsistent because if we put this into our system, it's going to contradict my ethics, my identity, my frequency, and my beliefs. Reject. It has been rejected, and there is no need to further anything else. It does not get added to my story. Now, let's assume for a minute that the person is freshly out of trauma recovery and they are still learning how to filter things properly. So a person comes along, gives their opinion, the opinion goes into the belief system, the same process happens, it doesn't feel good, except the defense system is new. The defense system doesn't quite know how to work just yet. What ends up happening is without going through the filtering system, it goes into the story. Now, you have a new emotion. That emotion is called confusion. Confusion is the stage when your point of view is accepted and you have something new in your point of view and in your story, but it contradicts your identity, your frequency, your intuition, your authentic living, and your ethics. But it's already been accepted as a belief. So now you have two beliefs, one that's yours, one that belongs to third person, and they don't match up. But because your defense system was down, it's been put into your story, and now you're confused. You are confused because in actuality, we're going to totally time back to the future this. You have two timelines going on, two stories, two perspectives. The first one is 1985. The second one is 1955. Now they are existing at the exact same time because they are existing at the same time, you now have two masters. You have the perspective with the third person, and you have the perspective with your opinion, with your belief, but they're existing at the same time. So you're trying to toggle between the both of them. This is where mood swings come from, is when you try and toggle both perspectives, or three perspectives, or four perspectives, because you have limiting beliefs. You have beliefs in your system, and you're loyal to your own, and you can't figure out which one is right. So you start toggling, or you try doing all of them at the same time, and now you have the emotion confusion. So the first emotion that we had was discomfort. The second emotion is confusion. Now let's assume third party comes along. Let's throw all that out. You've got your own, everything's flowing, it's beautiful. There is no third person in there. But let's say somebody comes along and they give you their information. They say something to you and it aligns with your frequency. It aligns with your authentic living. It aligns with what you love and who you are. It aligns with your ethics. You are given another emotion. This emotion is joy. It is happiness. It is, oh, I found a friend. It's that emotion. It is the emotion of confirmation that you have a people. It is love. That is what you are feeling. So when you hear a third person point, when you hear another person come in, you're either going to feel discomfort, confusion, or joy. The joy is confirmation and validation that you are right, ethical, that everything is alignment, that you are not alone. You are validated. Your frequency and your intuition hum with happiness. Now let's try another example. And by the way, that process goes through, joy goes into beliefs, joy hits defense system. Defense system doesn't even wake up because it feels good. Because it feels good, it passes right on through and adds to point of view. So let's try another one. Let's say somebody else comes through with another point of view. Your mother has died. Now, you're going to get another emotion. That emotion is going to start with shock or surprise. That is because this one is really going to change a lot. It could also be you've received news about cancer, or you've received news that somebody you love is going to die. This requires a complete shift of your story. This is not an option. This is where somebody comes to you and they give their political opinion or their philosophical opinion, and you can reject it. But when you have someone coming in and it's a life change, you've been fired, now you have to sit down and evaluate how, not if, how it's going to change your story. So every time you receive data, it's the question of, is it going to change your story? Yes or no? We're going to do a flow chart. Yes or no? And the next question is, if it's not going to change your story, you have to evaluate it to determine if you want to keep it or throw it away. The next thing is, if it is going to change your story, the next thing is going to be, how is it going to do this? Now, this is where we enter into the stages of grief. So the stages of grief only refer to the point of how. Now, as you can see up to now, there's been this whole other activity going. There's discomfort, there's confusion, there's happiness, there's ids and ethics, and there's beliefs, and there's the filtering, and the defense system turns on and evaluates. There's the rejection and the decision to add it to the story. There's discomfort and confusion and joy and shock. Grief only addresses the moment when you are going to have a change, and you've got to figure out how it's going to change you. That is why I have an issue with the stages of grief, is because it is one of like 50 different options. And the other 49 options are never discussed. They aren't even looked into or dissected. We only evaluate the stages of grief. To me, so that's very incomplete and closed-minded, which is why I don't talk about the stages of grief. I address the stages of the cognitive core processing, which is the mother lode of the stages of grief. The stages of grief is like chapter 10 in this massive 50 chapter section. Okay. So we are talking about the stages of processing. Literally, this is cognitive core processing. That's what we're doing here. Okay. When we are doing cognitive core processing, the first question asked is this going to change us? Is this going to impact us? Yes or no? Flow charts here. Flow chart. If it's going to change us, now it's something we have to evaluate and put it into our system. And our point of view has to change. It doesn't always change, though. And that's where we're going to go over in a minute. The other option is no, it doesn't have to change us. We can reject this information. This is just Joe Blow's opinion. This is just some guy we met at the gas station telling us his stupid opinion about the presidency. We can throw that out. Like that's such garbage. It's really, really garbage. So we decide at that point to consider the source. This is why we evaluate the source. And then we decide to reject the source because it's coming from Joe Blow over at the gas station about the presidency. So if it does change our perspective, this is going to go differently. Part of the belief is building up an expectation of your future. Your story is not just the past, the present. It is also of the future. Your point of view has 3 parts to it. Your perspective is built off of 3 parts. What did happen to you, what is happening to you, and what will happen to you. Your life and your decision is completely built off of these 3 perspectives that are all crammed into your story. Your story has a past. Your story has the present living now, and your story has the future. When we receive information that we don't like, it is doing one of 2 things. It is changing your story to correctly reflect past events, or it is changing the future that current events were anticipating. So the first example is what we do when we do shadow work. When we do shadow work, what you are really doing is altering your false story, your abuser's story, the 1955 storyline, to reflect your story, your 1988 timeline. When we do shadow work, this is equivalent to the second Back to the Future movie where Marty's got to go back to 1955, steal the gambling book from Biff, and then return it to the proper time period. When you do shadow work, you are living Back to the Future too. That's a really good analogy. That is shadow work. You want to completely eliminate the timeline of 1955 when Biff stole the book. You know that when he gets back in time and he realizes that Biff owns the entire town and he married his mother and he's like, oh my God, and he married your mother? Yeah, we got to get rid of that timeline. That's exactly what you're doing. You are getting rid of that timeline. So to do that, you have to go back to 1955 and you've got to steal the book from Biff. You're changing your perspective. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Zuckerman. Is it Zuckerman? I can't remember the man who directed those films. But my God, this is like the easy. I was trying to figure out how am I going to explain this? And then Back to the Future happened and I went, this is how I'm going to explain this. This is how I'm going to explain this. This is fantastic. I've never been more happy than Back to the Future. So that's what you're doing when you do shadow work. You are literally eliminating that alternate timeline when Biff stole the book. And that's it. You have an alternate perspective in your head that your abuser put there. And they lied to you, they gaslit you and altered events. They told you false beliefs and lies to redirect the truth and the reality of what took place. So you are in 1988, you're on your timeline and your perspective reviewing your trauma, and you've got your story. But then you've got a limiting belief in your brain like, adults always can be trusted. When you have that limiting belief put there by society because it wants you to think that garbage so you'll be an obedient slave, you end up doing and enforcing your abuser's forced perspective. You see how society enables abuse? So now you have this alternate timeline, this alternate perspective that is now contradicting what you know took place. But because you have self-doubt, because you have no defense system, and because you have an ill-defined identity, you can't do this. So what ends up happening is you rely on the adult to make the decision. But the adult abused you. But all adults can be trusted, says the societal government that wants to keep you as a slave. So you don't question your perspective. You default to the abuser's perspective. So you live in Biff's alternate hellhole forever. Until you decide this sucks and you want to go back to 1955 and correct it. So that's what you're doing with shadow work. You could just locate the limiting belief, remove the limiting belief, and then it will just fix itself. That's one way you can avoid shadow work. In the other case, this is what happens when you have the past point of view that's been altered. If it's the future point of view that's being altered, this is where job loss and loss of a child, loss of a loved one, that's where this comes in. And now we're going to alter the future. This is the part where life just sucks. This is the suffering that Buddha talks about. And there is just nothing we can do about it except handle it with dignity, be realistic, and do our best to allow nature to take care of us. So when we have a tragic event hit us, like the death of a loved one, the loss of a job, this is where we are talking about the fear of loss or the fear of unknown. This is where these two fears come in, is because we are trying to prevent an alternate future from occurring. So let's say your mom passes away. You know, I really don't like using this example because I feel like I'm manifesting this. So let's try, I don't have a dog. Let's say my dog dies. There you go. I don't have a dog. So let's say my dog dies and I envision taking my dog to a park. I envisioned Instagramming the crap out of my dog and turn it into a famous dog. And then along comes a car accident and my dog dies and I lose my dog. I had plans for that dog. I had hopes and dreams that now cannot exist. So when that new data comes in, there's going to be that moment of shock and, oh my God. And then it's going to move into the stage of, let's confirm that this data is correct, which is one of my favorite stages. I love the stage, are you sure? It's one of my favorite stages. This is the stage where the filter, that big funnel comes in, the data comes in, it checks and balances it. Do we have accurate data? Is this correct data? Your wife divorces you and you have the shock stage. What? Why are you talking about divorce? And you're clueless and you're just blindsided and you're like, what? And then it goes into the data processing. And when it goes into the data processing, you're sitting there looking at the data processing going, wait. I don't understand this. And you're confused and you're stuck. And you are trying to figure out the information. So you start questioning, well, why? Are you sure? Can't we go to marriage counseling? Can't we? We can work this out. Now you're in the negotiation stage. This is the stage where you are checking to make sure this information is correct. Correct. Because your perspective is at stake. Your story, your future story is at stake. You don't want to lose that future story. Most of us don't. When we get the thing right where we want it, we don't want to lose the story. So then comes the next stage. This is when it moves into the defense stage. This is when the defense system tackles it. I love this stage. The defense stage is the anger stage. It doesn't have to be anger. If it's a promotion, it goes through the same process. When a promotion comes down, come to my office, and you walk in your office and you're sweating and you're going, yeah, I'm here, boss. What is it? And the boss says, we love your work. We're giving you a promotion with a 20% raise. You're not going to feel anger. You're going to feel joy. It's going to go different. I'll show you how it's going to go different. First, you're going to have shock. Wait, what? Are you sure? Me? Well, that's your self-doubt because, well, I guess it could also, no, it's your self-doubt because the other way it can go is, of course, you think I'm awesome. Look at what I've done. You should be kissing my toes. That's an option too. So you get the information, you negotiated. Are you sure you chose me? You didn't choose Fred over in processing. You're choosing me. It's very exciting. And then once it's confirmed that, yes, you're getting a promotion, you're not going to feel anger. You're going to feel joy. You're going to tell this information to your defense system, and your defense system is going, let's celebrate, Bob. And you're going to pull out some champagne. You're going to call the wife and go, guess what? I got a raise. And you're going to celebrate. But if it's bad news, you're going to get angry. You're going to get pissed. Now, there's some of you going, no, I'm not. I never get pissed. We're going to talk about that. There's a reason why. This is, again, assuming this is an optimum mental healthy person. Okay. The next stage, I love the next stage, is inventory. It is not the depression stage. It is the inventory stage. I love inventory stage. Inventory stage is when you sit down and you count. It's when you count your gains or your losses. It's when you sit down with the math and you start calculating and you start planning because you are forming a new story. The inventory stage is when you collect all of this data and you start to balance checks and balances between your gains and your losses. You got a new promotion. Yay! 20% raise. Yay! More money. More taxes. See how that works? Once you start balancing that, then you have a number. You then take that number, you look at all of your expenses currently, you can add a big bulging number to it or a small number, and you can look at that and go, wow, that's going to increase X during our time of while I have this promotion. This is really great news. Then you start planning, wow, with that kind of money, I can go on a vacation, buy a bigger house, have the children I've always wanted. You see the list here, okay? Now you are planning a future. When you do the inventory stage, you are accessing identity. You are pulling right from identity and you are literally just going through this and you're just processing it. Look at all of my gains. Look at all of my advantages. Look at everything I'm gaining and how that's going to turn into boom, 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 this kind of a future. That's when you start forming the story in your head to develop this possibility. Now, current therapy tells you that you need to stop making stories. No, bad monkey. Making stories is what we do. We have to do it. Do it. Absolutely. You make those stories. But be realistic. You have to have the right data. And there's a time to make stories, and there's a time not to make stories. There are things that we make stories around that we cannot control. There are other things that we have to logically deduce to keep a story. Our perspective, our point of view is our story. If you are intelligent and you go to therapy and you know this, and your therapist starts to tell you, you need to really stop making stories, you're going to have an argument with your therapist. I did. Okay? If you are unaware of this process, you're going to most likely follow their advice and then completely throw all story out the window. And that's black and white thinking, which is actually what your therapist is doing when they say, you really shouldn't do stories. That's also black and white thinking. See what happens when the government tells a therapist what they should do? That being said, you're going to create a new story and you're going to release, this is important, lean closer. This is important. You're going to gently transfer your old story onto your new one. This is slow. This is a process. It has to be gentle. You have a 20% raise. That's a small story change. Very small story change. It's going to be better, but it's small. Now, let's go back to the example of a divorce. Yeah, I like a divorce. Divorce is so much nicer than death. I love that. So, wife tells you that they're divorcing. You sit down in the inventory stage and you start calculating the change, all the losses and all the gains. Now, if you think positive, you're going to see the positive changes. If you think negative, you are just going to inventory the negative. Positive thinking affects how we inventory. Negative thinking affects how we inventory. So if you are optimistic, you are going to alter your story too far positive. And if you are negative, you are going to inventory and change your story too far negative. Most people are negative. Most people with trauma only see negative. This is where black and white thinking comes in. This right here is why everything's a catastrophe. Change has happened, catastrophe. Grandma died, catastrophe. I got a raise, catastrophe. Yep, those people exist. The reason why is because they don't know how to see the positive. They only see the negative. So they only see what's going to impact them negatively. And it's going to be all of the negative, and none of it's realistic. So they're only going to see the downside. So they're going to adjust a perspective that only reflects horrifically negative. Now, what that's going to do is your perspective, your new story, is going to adjust either really negative or really positive. But by keeping a realistic but optimistic outlook, then it's going to keep you right accurate. This is what we call forecasting. In the world of supply and demand and purchasing, as it used to be my old job, this is forecasting. You have the ability, you have to be able to read what the sales are, what they did over the last X amount of years, what the growth or the decline was. And then you had to take the average and assess what you were going to do in the next year. And then you had to project that you were going to hit those numbers. If you're good at it, you could forecast accurately. If you're bad at it, you would either over purchase or undersell, and you would lose business. By over purchasing, you end up with a surplus of stock and inventory with no space to put it. And you would actually see, I spent more money than I should have, and that's a loss. So it's really an important job for a purchasing manager, a purchasing agent, when they do forecasting, to make sure they predict sales as accurately as possible to get it right in that sweet spot. You are doing the same thing when you have your filter, when you are doing inventory and you are sitting there putting things through and making sure that your story aligns accurately. But if you're very hopeful or you're very excited, you're going to over project. If you are negative, you're going to under project. You're going to see the downside. When you under project, those people fall into depression. Those people fall into suicidal ideation because they are hopeless. Sometimes people under project so much that they destroy hope in the process. You don't want to under project. It is better to over project. It is best if you're accurate. But this is a skill that requires conscious awareness. Now, this is the fun part. What if you are mentally ill? What if you get stuck in grief? What if you can't stop grieving? This is what happened. When you get to the inventory stage and you start to put together, and this is where it's not cut and dry. When you get shock, You are in shock at the same time that you're in negotiation. So this is shock and this is negotiation. It's not this, it's this. So you're going to be in shock, and then you're going to hit here with shock, and you're going to start asking the negotiation questions. Are you sure? So you are going to feel shock and negotiation at the same time. You are going to feel negotiation and anger, or negotiation and joy at the same time. You're going to feel anger and joy while asking the question, are you sure? Or are you sure? Because the emotion has started. The emotion is the emotion being sent off into this process to the conscious awareness, communicating to you, hey, we have bad news. We are going to see a decline of the point of view. We are going to see an uptick of the point of view. Things are about to change for the worst. Things are about to change for the better. When you are in the anger or the joy stage, you are going to start taking inventory. When you start taking inventory, you enter a kind of analytical stage, but you're still in anger or you are still in joy. In the case of grief, you will still be in sadness. So you have anger, sad, or joy. Okay. When you are in one of these three beautiful stages, or disgust, high inside out, when you are in one of these three stages, you are going to start edging into the inventory stage. Now, this is where it becomes a problem. As soon as you start to see the future point of view and story unfold, you reject the belief. That's it. You reject it. Your defense system will kick on and go, no, I don't want it. No. And it will halt everything. Now, when you halt everything in processing, when you reject the belief, you get stuck for years and you don't get out. You don't get out. You don't get out. You actually do. There's a way. I'm going to go over that, but you don't get out. This is where someone can be grieving for 30 years. Now, when a person is depressed, they had the shock, they had the negotiation, they had the sad. They started doing inventory, rejected. And the system shut down. They are permanently stuck in depression with the new point of view of misleading belief. I am never going to blank. I am never going to. That is because the person was not optimistic. They were so negative that they saw only the black and white negative. I am never going to blank. And it was so horrific to them that they rejected the belief. Well, they rejected the belief that would complete the process. So they froze the process. They tried the defense system. Excuse me. The defense system will push it through and complete the process, and then there will be a recovery, or it will completely reject it. And when it rejects it, it completely freezes everything, and then you get stuck in depression. But you don't get stuck in depression. You can get stuck in depression. You can also get stuck in anger. So if you start to get into the anger stage and you start to see that point of view processing that you don't like it, rejected. Now you are someone who is always angry. This is very common with people who are abused, and their perspective, their 1955 timeline is altered, and they start to realize the truth of what really happened. It happens around 20 years old when they start to get old enough to process abuse that happened to them, and then they get angry, and then they get stuck because they start to see the real perspective, and it rejects it in their defense system as a method to keep them safe. Subconscious mind is stupid. Oh, we're going to keep you safe no matter what. So it rejects this information. And now you are stuck forever in the emotion of anger because you started to see the perspective, and it made you so angry that your defense system just threw out the belief, and now you're stuck and trapped. You can get stuck in negotiation. I was stuck in negotiation for a year. When a breakup happens, when a divorce happens, this is when you can't believe it. That's it. You just can't believe it. I cannot believe it. That's what all of this is. You just can't believe it. And you're not saying the words, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. This is how I studied this process, is because I was stuck in negotiation for a year. I kept negotiating. Are you sure? I don't understand. What if we try this? 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 I couldn't get over it. And then I stepped back and I said, what the fuck is going on with me? And I realized I was stuck in negotiation. No different than if somebody had lost somebody they love dearly and they're stuck in grief, or somebody who's stuck in anger. But we only talk about the stages of grief. Oh, I hate that. We only talk about the stages of grief. So no one else is aware that all this other stuff is happening. No, there's the stages of anger, and there's being stuck in the stages of negotiation. And then there's not getting stuck at all. There's processing happening the way it's supposed to happen, and our perspective is shifting the way it's supposed to happen. And all of this is going together beautifully. To get unstuck, we're going to go over this. I just used the phrase, I can't believe it. And that is why you're stuck. Because somewhere in your brain, you can't believe it. Because if you were to believe it, it would contradict one of your limiting beliefs. So if you are stuck in grief, it is because you have a limiting belief that is in the way, and you cannot have the cognitive dissonance. You cannot have the dichotomy. So you can't believe it, because if you did, it would contradict this particular belief. So in order to undo this, you have to remove the limiting belief. I'm never going to X. That's your limiting belief. So you can't believe it. You have to change the belief. You're angry because you figured out that an abuse that took place to you happened to you that should not have happened to you, and you started to believe it. It's because the person who hurt you, you love them. Because you have that gorgeous belief in your brain that all adults are going to take care of you and love you, that all adults are safe and trustworthy. And because you have that belief crammed into your brain, they couldn't have possibly hurt you, but they did. So you can't believe it. Or negotiation. I see the possible future now that lays ahead. And that contradicts my intuition. That really contradicts my intuition, because my intuition tells me that X is going to happen. And if X is going to happen, then that can't happen. That is a wrong perspective. I can't believe it. So we reject. And that is why we stall out in the stages of grief. It's not grief. It's change. We are rejecting beliefs that we have to accept to keep the process going. Meditate. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. My intuition says I have to do it. I don't know why. I'll have to look at the logic later. Now, at every one of these stages and steps, our subconscious mind is releasing emotion to the conscious awareness to say, this is the status of X. When you feel shock, you're supposed to become aware and go, oh, I see what's happening here. And I love it now. I'm so efficient, and you will be too, that when you get emotions, you're going to go, hey, I know what this is. I know what's happening. I know what's going to happen next. Oh, I got to tell you a story. So I had a car accident in February 1st of 2023. I had a car accident. There was an injury. I had to call the hospital. I was carted and I went, okay, you just lost your car. This is going to change a lot. You're going to go through the stages of grief. Let's just go through this. I did this. Let's just do this. All right. Shock and awareness. Oh my God, I had a car accident. I said this. The EMTs show up, they talk to me, I explain where the ping is, and they're moving me into the thing. And I could feel the negotiation wearing off. I could feel the grief. I could feel the sad. I said to the EMT, have you studied any kind of psychology? No, ma'am. Okay, I've studied it for 28 years. I'm going to walk you through what I'm going to be going through because you're going to be my support buddy for the next 20 minutes. I am very sad that I just lost my car, and this is going to change a lot of things for me, and it's okay. I'm going to be fine. I'm really upset right now because I just lost my car, and I really don't know what that is going to entail, so I can't form my perspective right away, and now I'm sad. And I started to cry, and he went, wow, you're early. Usually people don't start crying until we arrive at the hospital. I said, yes, that's because I know about the stages of grief and I am aware of what needs to take place. So here I am 5 minutes after the accident going through the process. And by the time I got to the hospital, I was fine. Conscious awareness. When you are consciously aware, you can actually walk your subconscious through this process. And it's not messy. It's simple. You do a lot of pausing and you step back and you go, oh, this is what I need to do. My father, in my last visit upstate, told me that he's dying. Okay. A year ago, I would have been numb and I would have said, bring it. This time I went, how is this going to impact me? I'm going to go through bouts of processing as my subconscious mind slowly adapts. This is true whenever you get a terminal illness or you get information ahead of time. This is the beauty of the subconscious mind. This is one of the things that the subconscious mind has figured out. When the subconscious mind actually takes care of the cognitive core, things work out pretty well. When the fear system turns on, that's when the subconscious mind becomes an AI and it becomes dangerous and stupid. So what ends up happening is you'll go through the process and you'll feel your perspective shift. And then it will go through the process again as the reality sets in and it shifts again. So when you have to adjust from here to here, this is sudden versus giving yourself time to grieve. When it's sudden, you have no choice. When the partner of yours dies, you're going to feel that full shift and it's going to cause you pain. Discomfort is a spectrum. All emotions are on a spectrum. It starts with discomfort. If you ignore, well, it starts with comfort. You have comfort zone. Once you start to step out of comfort zone, this is where the perspective is happy. This is where the POV and all life is great. And then the next stage after that is discomfort. That's when you get information or news. That's when you decide to wander away from mommy. That's when you step into a new unknown and a challenge. That's your growth stage. The next stage after that is pain. Small pain, big pain. Big pain turns to trauma. And this is where we start to rewire the nervous system. This is where the defense system shuts down, and this is where the fear system kicks in and starts putting mental illness in. So you don't want to get to extreme pain. You want to keep it low to discomfort and a little bit of pain. And if you are consciously aware of what pain is, you will know, oh, I'm starting to feel pain. I need to soothe myself by bringing in love. So you pull love out and you start doing things that you love to comfort and reduce the pain. But if you don't know who you are, you can't pull from love. Now, can you? Because you don't know who you are. So you don't have any love to access because you lack identity. So when you start to feel pain, it goes high and it goes fast and it is painful. And you have nothing to pull from to soothe and comfort you. Nothing, because you don't have an identity. So you just feel pain. That pain will increase because you don't know what you're doing. And if identity is gone, so's your defense system, which means you only have your fear system, because you only have your fear system. It's going to turn on, and it's going to turn on hard, and it's going to turn on fast. Now you are dumping pain. Now you are traumatized. The fear system is going to rewire your nervous system to keep you safe. You have no love. You have no idea who you are. You are just trying to survive. Congratulations. You are a child of a Neanderthal. But had your parents done the work, had they allowed nature to do what you needed to do to develop your identity and your love, you would have an armory to defend yourself against pain and grief. You would be able to access gratitude for the time that you had with your loved ones. You would be able to feel love and nourishment. You would be able to use your defense system to keep you safe, to literally limit the amount of pain you experience, and your fear system would never turn on. But our society has taught us to reject emotions and to ignore them. So your emotions come in and we throw them away. So the pain gets louder because the subconscious mind turns up the volume because it's trying to deliver a message to you. Hey, you're in pain. Your system is being damaged. Do something. Access that love that I took away from you a while ago. You know, the love that I never bothered to nurture because society told you to throw that away too, because you live with Neanderthals. Now, to fix this,